Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to our LT Innovate ValueCast. My name is Philippe Wacker. I'm Executive Director of LT Innovate, the Language Technology Industry Association. Today in this ValueCast, we will be addressing how language intelligence and language technologies can be leveraged to create value for life sciences. And as usual, we have a very distinguished panel of experts with us. But let me immediately introduce to you our moderator, Bruno Herrmann, a member of our executive board, who will take over from here and introduce the panel and moderate the webinar. Bruno, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Philippe, and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Time flies. It's already the last ValueCast for this year. It's been a great year with quite a number of different topics that we touched or that we discussed during those ValueCasts. And today, it will be no exception to the rule. Today, as Philippe just mentioned, we have a great panel of experts, experienced people working in the life science industry. My own experience tells me that the life science industry is full of challenges, but also full of opportunities, not just because it's a regulated industry, and because of that, there are a number of processes, a number of practices that are different from none or few regulated industries, but also because this industry can definitely create a lot of value by using language intelligence and language technology. And that's going to be the main topic of the day, indeed, how value creation can come from selecting, implementing, and adopting language technology and language intelligence. So without further ado, I'm going to immediately give the floor to the panelists for their first introduction. As long or as people as panelists will introduce themselves, don't hesitate to put your questions in the chat already. At the end of the introductions, so after each panelist has introduced herself, there will be opportunities for you in the audience to ask questions directly, not just in the chat, but also in by unmuting yourself and by switching on your cam if you want to. So, but don't hesitate to put your questions or your comments directly in the chat. And if you don't want to ask those questions directly, I will ask those questions to the panelists. So let's get started. Let's put this panel on the road. And I would like to start by giving the floor now to Esther. Esther, the floor is yours. Not sure if it's me, but we cannot hear you.
Oh my God, of course. I was speaking to myself. I didn't unmute. Silly me. So thank you, Bruno, and hello, everyone. So my name is Esther Curiel. I am Globalization Manager at Zoetis Diagnostics. And I'm based in Dublin. I've been in the industry for well over 20 years now, longer than I care to admit. I'll be saying a couple more words about myself later on, as just to help you understand where I'm coming from in terms of looking at technology and so on. But for the moment, just to say that I'm delighted to be part of this panel. It's a fantastic conversation that I expect we're going to have. I wouldn't be an expert in technology myself, so I'm hoping to learn as much as I'll be sharing myself. Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you. Well, Bibiana, if you want to go next.
Thank you, Bruno. Greetings, everyone. And thank you again, Bruno and LT Innovate, for this invitation and also for the great work that you do to advance language technology and for gathering us all today. My name is Bibiana Magalhães. I work for Medtronic at our Global Translation and Localization Department. I am based in Maastricht in the Netherlands. And I also am not a technology expert, but you can consider me an enthusiast and supporter of any technology that adds value to our processes. And oftentimes I get engaged in projects that are that have a strong technology component. So hope to be able to share some of my insights and also to learn from my co-panelists and the audience today.
Thank you very much, Bibiana. And Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bruno. Welcome, everyone. And well, I will extend also my thanks to LT Innovate, as Bibiana already so nicely said, for organizing these webinars. I'm Laura Rossi. I'm Program Manager for Machine Translation at Medtronic and colleague of Bibiana, also based in the Netherlands. And I have been in the industry of localization for roughly 20 years, of which I spent roughly 15 with machine translation, so more on the technology side, experiencing the growth of machine translation from rule-based system to statistical and neural. So very exciting journey, and happy to share my experience and my perspective, and also to learn from the rest of you.
Thank you so much, Laura. I guess we can go now to some more information about each panelist and each organization. So Esther, if you are happy to share the slides that you prepared, so that you can set the stage for yourself or about yourself and about your organization, which I'm sure will trigger some questions from the audience. So Esther, feel free to share when you want.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to unmute this time around. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna be starting by trying to introduce, like, my setup is really quite different to what you're gonna be hearing from Laura and Bibiana later on. They have a very mature globalization program. We, in contrast to that, ours is really at the very early stages. So I think it can be an interesting counterpoint to what you're gonna be hearing from them afterwards. Well, just a very little extra about me. I look at technology, like my interest in globalization really and localization. I didn't come from inside the industry. My interest was more focused on the social aspect of language and communications. And that's really what informs my view on technology as well. I have held positions both on the vendor side and the buyer side. And I found something very enriching on both of them. So from the vendor side, I really like that exposure to a very large number of many different needs, many different technology solutions. That was really very enriching, and I think that was quite key for me. And then later on the buyer side, of course, what you get is the wider perspective on the position and the value of localization within the wider enterprise. But then in terms of technology, that helped me learn a lot more about what other technology might be in use across the company, that I might want to take into consideration myself, and then also how my own technology that I might be using and I might be bringing into the organization, how it might affect other teams within the company as well. Other than that, just to mention again, I joined Sweaties very recently. I've only been here about 5 months. I joined this summer. So again, I'm very thankful to the organizers for giving us this forum to discuss this topic. And I'll just a little caveat before I continue, just to say that the opinions I'll be sharing are my own and based on my own experiences, rather than those of my employer. So with that said, I'll tell you a little bit about Zoetis. We are an animal healthcare company. I am a pet owner myself. I have a beautiful black Labrador, so our purpose and our mission really resonated with me. And this is what we're about, really, nurturing the world by advancing care for animals. And we do that with a range of products that covers medicines, vaccines, diagnostics equipment, bio devices, etc. We have a presence in over 100 markets, and we have about 12,000 employees worldwide, approximately. We had a revenue last year of 7.8 billion, and 47% of that actually came from international markets. So this is quite an important area for us. That's Zoetis itself. Now, the area that I'm focusing on and where I sit within the organization is diagnostics, which is quite a recent addition to the Zoetis portfolio. It's and when I say recent, it's kind of less than 5 years. less than 5 years old, really. So the mission that we have within diagnostics is to enable veterinary professionals to make faster and to make better informed medical decisions for the care of animals. And we do that through a range of products that go from point-of-care analyzers to AI-enabled diagnostics to services like remote specialist review or post-diagnostic consultations, which are this part we're very proud of. It's a pretty cool service that it's really quite complex actually to bring internationally. So technology really will play a big part in our globalization strategy as we continue growing. It's interesting to say as well that the organization, the diagnostics organization, is a little bit of a hybrid between kind of more traditional pharma, but also tech. I'm seeing a lot of similarities with what I've seen before in the tech industry in terms of the speed, agile development, the frequency of releases, and so on. So the localization team needs to be able to respond to that as well. So that's our team, diagnostics. And now within globalization, I'm just going to give you a little bit of extra context on how early in our globalization program we are. I'm going to use the main stages from the localization maturity model from CSA Research. And at this point, we are at an early 2, I would say, repeatable stage. We are only just getting started, but we want to be very intentional about making sure that we set the right foundations for long-term success. To do that, I thought I would take a leaf of Simon Sinek's page and really start with why, what I want to achieve, basically, and then I'll bring the how I want technology to help me with that. That will be a function of what I want to achieve with it. So I'm kind of, I think about it in 3 buckets. The most basic one, of course, is increasing efficiency. And I don't think I'm going to say anything new for any of us here, anyone in the audience. So, of course, I want to reduce my cost. I want to accelerate my time to market. I want to reduce the intense amount of manual effort, sometimes waste, sometimes noise that a lot of localization teams have, especially at these very early stages. And of course, I want to increase our ability to scale, because this is going to be very key to us. Now, with all that increased efficiency, I want to use that to redirect the focus of the globalization team away from just dealing with files, dealing with escalations, all that noise and waste that I mentioned. I want to move the focus away from that and into bringing more value, bringing additional value that is more clearly linked to business needs. So getting people to spend extra time with stakeholders, looking more at what additional technology can help us to achieve business unit goals and so on. And then the last bucket is enabling, our language technology should enable us to bring our international customers an experience that is comparable to that of our customers in the US. So for instance, when I think of chatbots or when I think of those consultation services that I mentioned earlier, our customers in international markets should be able to access those services as well, where it makes sense. And if I wanted to extend that, I would also say internal teams as well need to be getting comparable focus as well, say for the training of field force, etc. They should be able to get a comparable experience as well. So those are my 3 areas that are kind of my principles, really. Having said that, how did we start? So we know where we want to go. We are still at a very early stage. What are we doing? And again, I'm going to map this more or less to the localization maturity stages as I see it. So I'm going to start with what was there when I arrived and what we've achieved in the just couple of months since I started. And then I'll talk a little bit more about what's on my radar for the future. So before I joined, what was happening was that we were leveraging the vendor's technology. And I think this was actually a very clever decision. And in many cases, you don't actually need to invest in the technology yourself. It comes with costs, of course, but it comes with a lot of overhead as well associated with it. So I think it's worth a while really considering, do you need to invest in technology or not? In our case, we were leveraging the vendor's TMS. And as I say, that was the right decision at that point, particularly if you don't have an internal owner for localization. I think this is the right way to go. But as you grow and evolve, you start seeing that, for instance, you lose control, or you don't have control over your own assets. You're generating a big amount, of multilingual data that is a business asset, really, that you don't have control over. So that, for me, that's one of the big reasons why I would go for a TMS myself, for instance. And then, of course, you're also linked and a little bit stuck with your vendors. It's harder to move if they're controlling the assets. So there was a decision made to invest in a TMS. That the selection process actually happened before I joined. And what I've been working on since has been really the TMS implementation. We went live recently. We're integrating with content repositories, and there's a lot of value that can come from this, out of speed and so on. And one area that I'm looking at as well at the moment is increasing the ability for our stakeholders to self-serve. And that's important to me at the moment, again, because I'm a very small team. But even as we go forward, I do want to maintain a lean organization. So this will be a key part of it. Of course, we want to enable those stakeholders. Like there is a certain amount of education and enablement that needs to happen before, so that this can be successful. So that's in terms of what we've done, what we're doing. Now, what I'm looking at, what's on my radar for the future, and this, again, it's only been a few months of me being at Zoetis, so I'm still learning a lot about the organization. So this might change in future. But some of these things, I'm pretty sure now that I want to be investing in them, looking into them more seriously, like machine translation, for instance. So I'm very looking forward to hearing from Laura on her experience. Terminology management, for instance, is one that I've used in the past, and I found quite a bit of value, not just for myself and the localization, globalization team, but also for other stakeholders within the company. Now, one important thing to say here is that very often you can find many of the functionalities that you need within TMSs themselves. You don't always need to go for specialized technology. It really does depend on your needs, and you really need to ask yourself that question of, is this going to reduce the complexity for me, or is it going to add to it? Is it worth my while or not? So that's something that, like, say, linguistic quality, for instance, that would be one that, even though this is a topic very close to my heart, I've been focusing a lot on it in the past, I would wait and see to decide, do I need to invest or not? And again, out of these, you can access them through your vendor. So you might not want to invest. That's an important decision to make as well. As I continue moving, so these, as I say, are things that I have on my radar. I'll decide what I need or not. The last two in there, artificial intelligence enabled voice dubbing and interpreting technology. These two, for instance, I see them very linked to that pocket that I mentioned earlier, which is about giving all customers the same experience. So again, like our consultation services, we want to be able to offer those in all countries, but that comes with extra complexity that you don't have in the consultation service in the US, for instance. So that's where I see technology can really help us fulfill our business goals and give customers that same experience. And with that, that's me done. I hope that serves as an introduction to the topic. And I'll pass it over back over to you, Bruno.
Thank you very much, Esther. That was great. It was a great overview. What I really liked about your framework, if I can put it like this, is that you want, or you have already in mind, something that you would need to build to get a real globalization ecosystem. So not just a TMS, not just machine translation, but a real ecosystem, which I think is a great trend for the moment in the globalization industry, is that in the past, many companies, organizations were focused on translation management systems and CAT tools. But now, with the progress of machine translation, but machine learning in general, and also other types of technologies, it's time for a number of organizations to consider. And I know it's not easy, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying here that what you have on your radar is going to be done overnight. But it's great that you have already the vision to build or to create this ecosystem that will serve the purpose that you have in your organization, and to create value, because that's where I believe that value is going to come from more and more in the future. It's from an ecosystem, not just one tool. And so perfect. I mean, I'm sure there will be a number of questions for you, Esther. So be patient, they will come. So again, just a reminder for everyone in the audience, feel free to post your question in the chat. If you want, I can read them and I can share them after all presentations. But of course, after the last presentation, you are more than welcome to unmute yourself and to ask questions directly. So either you post it on in the chat, or you wait for a few more minutes and you will be able to unmute yourself and make your comment or ask your question. So now let me move on to Bibiana. So Bibiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bruno. Just a second so I share my screen. If all is well, you can see the presentation. Oh, thank you. I would like to start with a small legal premise to share that obviously Laura and I are very happy to participate in this event, and the views and opinions expressed during this session are solely our own opinions and not necessarily represent the opinions of Medtronic or any past employers of ours. And with that said, I would like to introduce myself a little further and introduce Medtronic to you, and a little bit of the current state of language technology in our organization. So for the past 15 years, I've had the honor and the pleasure to contribute to the Medtronic mission to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. We operate in 4 large portfolios, the cardiovascular business, neuroscience, medical surgical, and diabetes. And in each portfolio, we have hundreds of products that impact people's lives. And naturally, any content that we translate that goes to the outside world goes through quite a high scrutiny. But on the other hand, content that we may translate for internal purposes to facilitate day-to-day businesses may have a different bar in terms of quality aspects. And I'm sure Laura will elaborate a little bit more during her talk when she talks a bit more about machine translation. As a company, we are 90,000 employees strong, and we are present in more than 150 countries. That means that we have a lot of translation needs for the outside world, and like I said, also for our internal functions. We have started with language technology in a more consistent way since 2003, when we implemented comprehensive translation management systems back then. An ecosystem already with a translation management portal, with translation editors, with all the good things that translation editors come with nowadays, with the quality features and terminology features. We have also developed as a company, Medtronic, not our department, but overall, our own homegrown content management system. We have looked at solutions in the industry, but soon quickly realized that our requirements are quite specific and that the cost of customization would not pay off in the long run, and that we decided to develop our own solution. More recently, we also abandoned off-the-shelf solutions for the project management system, and we created our own so as to match our process needs and also give us the flexibility in customizing and developing at our own pace. We do, however, use off-the-shelf systems from third-party partners, suppliers, for our translation editing, translation memory, and terminology databases. So we have a combination of homegrown developed and off-the-shelf systems. In addition to that, and beyond the list that I'm showing here on the slide, we also use indirectly a lot more language technology through partnership with our preferred suppliers. Oftentimes they have the capacity and the array of options that we do not have, although as a department we are covering a large volume, it doesn't always make sense to invest internally on certain solutions. And we find that our partners are sometimes much better equipped than we are to provide a good service and solutions. In my role as a program manager, I am often involved in implementations, selections, and also monitoring of technology solutions. What we focus a lot, especially in early stages of any project where we may be looking into technology, is really asking ourselves, what is the added value that that technology will bring us? What is the return on investment? And quality may be defined differently in different areas, in corporate communications versus a patient IFU, or even more importantly, a software user interface that can actually activate or deactivate a therapy that the patient is receiving. So we have also different flavors of the translations that we do, and also quality needs to be looked at differently for those different flavors. Naturally, cost is a key component in anything that we do. Funding doesn't come from the sky. It usually needs to be planned, and we need to have a good business case also to show that there will be a return, either monetary or intangible in terms of quality or in terms of speed. And naturally, time. Any solution that helps us bringing speed to market has our attention, and it's something that we want to continue looking for. This is the part that I had prepared for my introduction. After this, I would pass on the word to you, Bruno, or to Laura.
Thank you very much, Bibiana. And indeed, I don't want to keep Laura waiting. Laura, it's your turn.
Thank you, Bibiana and Bruno. I can plug in very well into what Bibiana said. So I work for Medtronic. So I started work for Medtronic in 2021. But as said, I have 15 years of experience in implementation of machine translation. Worked mostly for multinationals like Osei Technologies, LexisNexis, and then Medtronic. So in a variety of businesses. So I had the chance to see the implementation in different environments, and certainly in life sciences, it's another story. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about machine translation at Medtronic, where it came from and what we are using it for. So the first adoption of machine translation happened some years ago. It's not that old as the translation memory system implementation that Viviana was mentioning. It's much more recent. And it didn't come from initiative of translation department, but more out of a concrete need for access to information from side of subject matter experts. So we have subject matter experts that have a specific task, and that task can be, speeded up by using language technology. And it's actually very nice that the adoption came from a concrete use case and not, let's say, from the traditional way of implementation of MT in a localization workflow. And from there, we expanded machine translation for usage in different corporate functions. We are looking at customer support, customer complaints, HR, IT support, inclusion and diversity teams, for mostly internal content and communication, for something which is not critical, so no major decision making affecting patient safety is based on machine translation output. So we are making sure that it's non-patient facing content and that people understand very well what they can or cannot do with this technology within the organization. So we do train our machine translation users. We provide them with the information about MT. And there is lots of more interest within the organization in implementing language technology for making sure that this corporate information reaches our colleagues overall across the world in their own language. So for accessibility reasons as well. If you can go to the next slide, Viviana, thank you. Sorry. So I wanted just to touch a little bit on some challenges that I'm seeing in implementing machine translation. And I think this is valid also for other types of language technology, especially nowadays that we are using AI-based technologies. But these kind of technologies have become, like, let alone not translation memory systems, it's another story, but machine translation, think about entity recognition, chatbots, and something like this. So these kind of technologies have become kind of commoditized, and they're very easy to integrate. So a good programmer can make an easy integration within an application and this kind of technology. So what happens is that in organizations of our size, you will find often also that these technologies have been implemented in different places, also because of different use cases. And it's quite a challenge to create alignment from perspective of a globalization team like ours as to which technology to select for corporate usage and how can we leverage from the same tech stack and assets and data assets. There is also a problem in shared ownership in terms of the fact that there is kind of some things are responsibility of the vendors, some things are in the realm of IT, and some others in the realm of translation. So there is a huge need for clarity on the roles, who is doing what, and whose responsibility is the management of the data, or management of the tech, the maintenance of the applications, and so forth. There is also a little bit of an underestimation from side of end users about other criteria that are not quality. So when we are talking about machine translation, everybody thinks, for example, the output can be ridiculous, or it's not good enough, or we need to focus on quality to get the best quality output, which is true, and it's kind of a given. So customization is those capabilities are also kind of given. But sometimes end users do not see the other part, which especially in our type of organization in life science is very important. So privacy, security, compliance to laws, regulations, and standards in terms of in different regions as well, especially when you're working on a global scale. And the last 2 points, and I will leave you with that. It was a little bit of also food for thoughts and discussion, but automation versus AI. So we are kind of accustomed to, think that automation is something that can help us by performing a job that we previously were doing by hand, but then, performs this faster at the kind of same level of quality. The automation offered by machine translation of AI-based tool is not the same level of. So it's a different way of interpreting automation, a different mindset that the end users have to have towards this type of technology. And sometimes the fact that these tools are performing that well, so machine translation has reached can discuss about that, but they say human parity level can be counterintuitively a kind of drawback, because people tend to believe the output of the tools, not remaining skeptical about what is actually outputted by the tool. So and that's a very safe and way of using it. So we need to invest, in my opinion, in users' education, not only for machine translation, for other types of language technology which are based on AI, so that people are not trusting it blindly. And with that, I think I will leave it back to you, Bruno. Maybe you can take some of these points in the discussion later.
Absolutely, Laura. I think this is a great slide summarizing the many challenges that organizations are facing in general. But I can recognize myself in this slide because when I was working in the life science industry, I could take all these points, as ownership, and I fully understand, obviously, the need to make sure that language intelligence and language technology are well understood by people in general, so that they know what it is, but they also know what it is not, because that's the problem. Sometimes people are making dreams, or are they making assumptions about language technology because they don't know exactly what it does, or they don't know enough about what it does. So I'm sure there will be questions or comments about that. So now it's time for questions, comments from the audience. I don't see anything in the chat for the moment, which may mean that people are eager to unmute themselves and to ask questions. So who wants to go first? Feel free to unmute yourself and to ask questions.
If I may, I actually have a question for Laura.
Oh yeah,
If
sure.
that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Laura, you touch on any developer can integrate with machine translation with other. I was just wondering if you have any tips, for once you realize that someone is using these systems and you're not controlling the how and the technology and so on. Do you have any tips for kind of making them realize the risk, but also work with you so that they can still get the benefit, but they're using it more in a safer manner, I suppose, and in a more controlled manner?
Yeah, I think it's the risk is more if people are going out maybe to open open platforms and submit data there, and that's a little bit, I think, responsibility of the organization itself to say, should we block these sites, or do something like that. But if somebody is using that, let's say in a secured manner, the problem you have there is maybe that you can't really share assets, or you can't benefit from consistency across different teams by using, for example, custom engines which are shared across everybody and the organization. So I think it's to show the benefits of doing that by, let them see what it means if you're creating a custom engine that talks the terminology, for example, of your, of your own organization, and which kind of productivity they gain by using that versus a standard, for example, baseline engine. But further, if they are using kind of a secure thing, I mean, it's just great that so many people are using the language technology within the organization, and it's just difficult to create alignment. It also creates duplications, which you might want to avoid for perspective of streamlining the work.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, good point. Any question, any comment from the audience? If not, I have a question, which is to circle back on what you said about adoption and about educating or bringing some awareness around language technology and language intelligence. I understood, correct me if I'm wrong, I understood, Laura and Bibiana, that in your company, the approach is pretty much top down, right? That a decision is made by the business leaders, and then it has to be adopted. Language technology has to be adopted by various teams. They have to understand what it is, etc. Did you notice some differences since you are a global company? Did you see any difference or any variance in terms of adoption, speed of adoption, or depth of adoption according to regions? So, for instance, is there any difference between North America and Europe, or Europe and Asia, for that matter? Do you see, or maybe there is no difference, but if you see a difference, what do you think it can be due to?
If I could take this question, we do see some differences, and I think it connects with one of my dreams for increased interoperability in the translation environment. As I explained, we recently moved to an off-the-shelf translation editor, which for partly we are happy with, but ideally, we would like to work in a system or in an environment where we do not tie the end user to a specific tool, but rather work based on our requirements and and following the right standards to ensure that we can leverage and reuse set translations in different platforms. As part of that change, we noticed quite some difficulties in adoption for some languages more than others that could be related to the region and some tools being more popular in some regions than others. The difficulty, the challenge we face there is that we are limited to work with resources that are knowledgeable about those tools. And for those that aren't, we do need to invest in training and making sure that the same principles are followed consistently.
Yeah, great point. I'm not sure, Esther, if you have some perspective on that, because the challenge must come to play for you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is still early for me, but I am noticing certain things like I suppose it's the depth of information that people might need is different. There are some commonalities, depending on the region. Like there tends to be, from my observations anyways, like Europe perhaps, and certain countries within Europe more so, and maybe Japan perhaps, and so on. They will want to understand technology better and possible risk, and they want to really reassure themselves to a much deeper level than perhaps, stakeholders in the US might. This is a very broad statement. It's kind of from previous experience, outside of the life sciences and so on. But yeah, it's just a thought there.
Okay, thank you. Once again, I'm going to ask the audience if there is any comment or a question. It doesn't have to be a question, by the way. It can be a reaction. Oh, there is somebody. I see.
This is Arpad speaking. Greetings to Bibian and Laura. We used to be colleagues.
Hello,
So, long time no see. Just one question, maybe also for Esther as well. I am working as a technical writer and also responsible for translations. So what is your experience? All the approaches that you mentioned, is that somehow looped back to the source writing methods or to technical writers, or is there any integration between the translation cycles that you explained to the original source content writing? Not sure if I'm making myself clear, but
yeah. No, I can start very briefly, and then maybe Liliana and Laura, Viviana, sorry. Yeah, I think there's great synergy between content management, content creation, and localization. It totally makes sense to integrate the two. That's something that we're doing ourselves, and I think sometimes it takes technical writers by surprise, how much value integrating with localization technology can have. But there's also so much more additional value from sharing assets like terminology, sharing technology for terminology management, and so on. And then this is not so related to the technology, more so perhaps to just general education and so on. But they often benefit as well from understanding just a few principles in terms of global writing and so on. And one thing that I'd love to explore in more detail, and this is something that I haven't done yet, but it's kind of how to measure the quality of the source content to start with, and then kind of there's automated, you know better than myself, there's macrolinks, congruence, and so on. How to incorporate that into the localization program as well, perhaps even as an intake criteria, just in order to then improve the quality of the localized content as well. But I'm going to stop now because I could talk more. But
maybe I can
I'd love
add
to hear your perspectives as well.
Yeah, maybe I can add there, and Achtad, you know very well, we do have our content management systems and our translation workflows fairly connected, and the source is critical. The quality in the source is critical for a good workflow in the translations processes. And we do also ensure that we have within the process a way to feedback to content authoring whenever we find something that is unclear or that causes problems in the localization process. So that those mechanisms ensure that there is a continuous flow of information and improvement also on the source.
Does that answer your question?
Sure, it does. So thanks very much. Yeah.
Right. More questions, more comments, more reactions. And of course, if somebody in the audience has any experience regarding, the adoption, but not just the adoption, the selection or the implementation of language technology, it's time to really share. So,
Bruno, while the audience thinks, I have a question because I think I got something that Esther mentioned. The question if you need to invest in technology or not. When do we know when not to invest in technology, and if there are examples, and I'm asking also to the audience, to the panelists, if there are examples where we may think that the technology is the solution, but perhaps there is another solution.
yeah. Anyone from the audience would like to react, would like to comment, answer?
I can fully relate to this point. I am in the middle of this cycle at the moment with the writing tool set, and there is this company-wide, not push, but kind of expectation to go to a certain tool set, which I'm not really happy about. And I'm hearing from colleagues that they are also not happy about. So maybe there's also another kind of constraint that maybe within the organizations, it can also be a scenario that the decision is not really made by those people who are, who have the knowledge to and the experience to be able to realistically judge, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. That was also part of the reason why I joined this session. Maybe if somebody can also share some sort of similar situations or whatever. So, yeah, but that's a good point, and this is exactly the problem that I'm facing at the moment.
I guess it's also, if I can maybe add something into that, Viviana, I think it's also a matter of first defining the problems that you want to solve. So, and then see which technology is around that solves the problem. And the fact that there are lots of technologies that are also kind of hyped and marketed very strongly on them, we should use this, should we use that? Yes, but which problems are you actually trying to concretely solve? So start from the problem, then plug in whatever is needed to solve it. and not the other way around. I find it a little bit dangerous to go the other way around. I understand it's a good way of getting something done fast and piloting something, for testing something, more than it's more than welcome. But when you really need to implement something, you need to start from the problem and then calculate really what's your return on investment on implementation of such technology, because some technologies are very cool, but they're also quite expensive. So
exactly. Yeah, and I think that connects back to what is the return of investment, right? And I asked the question also because we had to reflect on it internally when we look at personal identifiable information in our documents, and how do we ensure that clinical documents are adequately anonymized from any personal identifiable information. Data anonymization software could be a great tool to help that process, but at the same time, we conclude that that would make us almost numb to the fact that personal identifiable information is reaching us. So as an approach, and going back to what Arpad was also remarking on the quality of the source, we addressed that by process. We decided not to invest in the software, and decided to ensure that the process brings that feedback to the earliest person in the process, so that we clean anything that we have to clean from our files, and that we also reach the hospitals in the first place that send documents outside with that information. Naturally, that anonymization software could be a help to mitigate any risks, but we already need to do incoming inspections anyway to verify that that information is not present in the files before distributing it further in our workflows. So this is an example that for us actually works a bit as a reminder that a technology solution may be the right solution, but sometimes may be an overkill and actually work against us. And no offense to any data anonymization software company, because I still believe that it has a lot of value. It's just that we found another way of tackling it.
I love that example, Viviana. It's fantastic. And yeah. If I may add another thought, it's that technology is getting so complex now that any of us, like no matter how much of an expert you are in a particular area, you're going to have so many blind spots. And like someone like me, I'm a generalist. I am aware that I have so many blind spots in terms of the technology that I might or might not want to implement and so on. So it really becomes important to really make sure that you're getting the right stakeholders' input into your decisions. Just get as many perspectives as you can so that you understand really, like to your point, Arpad, if so many of you are unhappy with the technology, it's not going to be adopted. That adoption is not going to be successful. And I wonder what's the percentage of, technology implementation projects that end up not bearing the fruit, like the initial ROI analysis might not have taken these things into consideration, and the ROI was never realized because of problems with adoption. So yeah, just a thought again, to make sure that you think about who else do I need to involve in this, and in what capacity, and how else can I educate myself, and where needed. Like I totally advocate for bringing in the experts, not try to decide everything yourself.
Oh, there is a comment in the chat from Miguel Serna saying that I wonder if technology can ensure anonymization. What we do is require this resource material without personal identifiers when anonymization is required. Okay, yeah, anonymization is of course a very sensitive topic. I remember my days in the life science industry, anonymization and de-anonymization as well, which is another step, which is even more challenging than anonymization itself. But I think it's one of these processes where indeed language technology poses a number of challenges and a number of opportunities as well. As you said, Bibiana, no offense for anonymization companies. I think, you know, it's a very tough job. I don't envy them. I think it's really something which is very sensitive, but which is highly necessary as well. So, any additional question or comment? If not, I would like to circle back on the value creation. And Bibiana, in your slide, you summarized it brilliantly, which was to say it's about quality, it's about time, it's about cost. So, of course, these are the main drivers for value creation. But in your experience or in your organization, if you can share, do you also go deeper than that, and do you use, you know, specific performance indicators like productivity of people using technology, you know, ease of use, the time that you need to, sorry, the time that people need to be able to use technology properly? Because there are a number of, I would say, user experience or customer experience indicators that can, in my opinion, that can or that should be considered to measure the value of language technology and language intelligence. So is it something that you have done or that you consider, just to go deeper than the three main drivers and say to your management, for instance, you know, this is the result of the implementation of or the adoption of machine translation. Look, you know, we increase productivity by 20%, or we increase satisfaction from end users or patient experience by 50%. Are you diving into that? And if so, how deep do you dive into
Right.
it?
Yes, we do track a lot of data in our systems, and regularly review our key performance indicators. They typically go around the space of lead time, volumes processed, and yeah, all sorts of indicators that helps us viewing if that we are implementing efficient solutions that then result in a value. We put a lot of focus in early stages of the projects to make sure that we articulate what is it that we want to achieve with the technology or in question, and what should be in our assumption in early stages, the benefits of said technology. And once implemented, we measure the success and verify that our assumptions are or not met through our KPIs. And we should indeed see our overall cost per page reducing, our overall lead times becoming faster, or our quality issues decreasing. So there might be different types of indicators that we look at for the different technology solutions.
Yeah. And I agree to that. Maybe I can add something with regard to machine translation, since we do not use machine translation integrated in our localization workflow, because simply doesn't, also a choice, you know, for the moment, it doesn't make much sense because we have lots of leverage from translation memory. So it would not create lots of value in that space. But from within the organization, it's certainly measured by the users themselves, because they look at, for example, how much time they spent before and after implementation of machine translation for their own tasks. So by different groups, so we receive feedback about that. We measure also adoption rate across the organization, how that grows with time, and also how many complaints we have, of course, on quality or of the system. So different indicators than what Bibiana was mentioning, because it's more related to the technology layer only and the adoption of that layer.
Great. Esther, I'm sure you have some perspective on KPIs.
Yeah, not very different, to be honest, from what Bibiana and Laura have shared. Speed ones are always up there, you know, utilization as well of the technology, and then what that enables as well. So sometimes it can help shorten not just the time to market, but sometimes it can help shorten the time that internal employees, like sales teams, etc., might take to actually, you know, pitch projects, how like it can shorten their time to sell and so on. So those are interesting to look at as well.
Excellent. Questions, comments from the audience? Feel free to unmute yourself or even to switch on your cam like, oh, you have one more question.
Yeah, I have one to Laura regarding machine translation. Language groups. I'm specifically interested in if you do any machine translation into Hungarian or any other Finno-Ugric languages. And if you do, what is the general impression of users, or what is the experience there?
Okay, Hungarian is not one of the languages that we use the most, but I know by experience it's one of the most difficult languages for machine translation. So I guess that's also a problem with implementing these kind of solutions, that how do you bring across to the users that the experience won't be exactly the same for each language pair. So, and that's not only for machine translation, it's for all kind of language technology, because if you're thinking about identification of personal information works pretty well on English, then as soon as you have another language, it works slightly different, right? So that differentiation is still there, and there is promise in the research that lots of new technology, new ways of doing things like big language models are making life easier for low resource languages. But I don't think we're there yet. That's my experience. So if you're thinking about Hungarian, I think, yes, if you need to post it in Hungarian, you will have more work than somebody who needs to post it in Spanish.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. I had a quick question for you, Esther, because you shared your journey or your planning, which is great to see the various milestones which are so critical for value creation. So obviously, adoption is a very important part of value creation. I was just wondering if you, at this point in time, if you have already defined in your organization or outside your organization, groups of users, groups of people who are going to be your priority in terms of value creation, so that you can show the rest of the organization that you, as a globalization leader, by using language technology and language intelligence, you can create value, some quick wins, rather than just wait 1 or 2 years before being able to demonstrate value creation. Did you identify some groups? I'm specifically interested in your organization, because I know from my own experience that there are some functions that are not exactly excited about language technology. And there are some other functions that are really excited about technology. So where do you stand in your process to identify those people?
Yeah, I've identified a couple of them, and I think what I want to do is, rather than trying to implement the technology and kind of get the different teams to adopt it and so on, I do want to use these specific teams or individuals that are actually very eager, because it's going to make their life so much easier, or it's going to make something that they thought was not going to be possible for the international markets. It is suddenly making it possible, so they want to collaborate with you. And that my plan basically is to work with these people, roll it out in that controlled environment, or that small environment, if you like, and then use that, expecting it will be successful, using that almost as a business, business case is not the word, as a case study almost, to help me then expand that into other parts of the organization. It's also a need, it's a necessity that I have, because I cannot do things at a big scale just with my team of one. I need to take things in bite-size amounts that I can manage and I can handle, and I can devote myself to making them successful.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, as you said, a one-person team has to be really cautious. So,
yeah.
Absolutely. Not sure, Bibiana and Laura, if you have any more thoughts about those strategic moves about targeting groups of people for adoption.
Targeting groups of people from the user's point of view, I imagine, or from the
from a user point of view, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can say something about machine translation. And for us, I think it was a very fortunate case because those groups came up with the idea of using machine translation in the first case. So we do see it often that we kind of don't need the showcases because we have lots of groups coming to us to say we want this. So we want actually to integrate this kind of language technology. Actually, I do see sometimes a little bit the opposite. So there is almost, they're almost over enthusiastic about something, and then you really need to slow them down for machine translation in that sense. So thinking sometimes things could replace entirely the human translation workflows, and that's not the case. So. But yeah, we also use some kind of case where we have successful implementation to showcase to other teams and then show them how we can do things, what's the process that we will follow to customize engines, to build a solution that integrates with their applications and so forth.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see any question in the chat, but
Bruno, I have a question for the audience or the.
Oh, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Laura or Viviana, I just wonder if anyone has any experience creating data sets or creating data to train translation memory, to train machine translation, for instance, or basically like where you start with a very reduced amount of multilingual data. How can you jump into these things sooner rather than later, but do it in a way where you're going to be getting enough quality? And this question is open to anyone in the audience as well.
I can maybe take it and then see if in the audience there is somebody else who wants to add. Yeah, I do have it. So I mean, it depends a little bit what your needs are in terms of machine translation, because there are lots of good baselines around from commercial systems that you can easily train/tune with a relatively small amount of data coming out of your, let's say, normal translation process or traditional translation process, or whatever you save within your translation memories. It's a fantastic asset to train your custom machine translation in this way. If you're thinking of starting from scratch, then you really need an immense amount of data. Not even sure if it makes any sense nowadays, unless you have a very specific use case where you have this immense amount of data and it's very, very domain specific. I had some experience in the past with that. But otherwise, yeah, leveraging from solutions and be able to store your assets, be able to identify within your organization if there is anything that you can use which is bilingual already because it has been created maybe in the two languages, and then be able to align it, and it's certainly something that you can do. Moreover, there are also lots of companies on the market that can help you with that part. They're really specialized in customizing engines or even aggregating machine translation engines, so creating these options where, depending on quality, you can switch from one engine to the other and just plug it in by integration. So yeah, it is. So if you have translation memories, and yeah, there is always a kind of minimum required for, let's say, your customizations to see the advantage of adding your data. So if you have too few data, that will not work. But if you have consistent amount of data, good amount of data that you can input, you will really see the benefits in terminology.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I'm curious to hear if anyone has actually purchased data and how that worked for them. If it was, if it actually helped them achieve their purposes, or it wasn't worth the spend and so on. If anyone has that experience.
Maybe not in the audience today, Esther, but since a number of people will watch this in replay mode, you might get the answer a little bit later. But it's a great question indeed, because language data is going to be the gold of the industry. Is already the gold of the industry actually, but it's going to be more and more I would say the value booster in terms of using technology as a whole, but just creating your data or buying your data. I think that's a great point. I think I had that challenge myself in the past, and yeah, it's Laura has made a great point. It's all about the right data source, the right data sets. But having said that, sometimes it depends on your organization. Sometimes the organization can do that on its own. Sometimes you need to get the help or the contribution from an external partner. So I think it relates very much as well to how your organization is willing to tackle this challenge directly or not directly. So there are pros and cons in each situation. So I think that it's not an easy decision, I think.
No, and there is also maybe something I was forgetting that it could also be interesting. Machine translation has also nowadays forms of adaptive MT, so where you basically don't need lots of data for training, but the system will kind of learn while you're translating and providing input as a post editor. So that's also where you don't have lots of data for training to start with, so you can also go into that
true.
space. Yeah.
Thanks, Laura.
Great. Questions, comments? If not, I would like to circle back on value creation, but from another perspective, which is we talked a lot about the adoption, but before the adoption, there is the selection and the implementation of the technology. These are critical steps. And just from your experience, from your perspective, do you see that as a highly collaborative process? In other words, is the decision-making process to select language technology and language intelligence, is it something that is really collaborative between your team and other teams, so that there are multiple decision makers across the organization? Or do you see that, because I know this is happening in some companies, do you see the selection and the implementation as an IT project? Sometimes in some companies it's an IT project, and it's not that collaborative. It's more like one team driving everything, deciding about technology and deciding about the implementation. So how do you see that? And if you see some pros and cons of having it very collaborative or not collaborative. And what I mean by that is that, of course, typically when a process like this or implementation is more collaborative, there is of course a better chance that value will come sooner, because many people will be involved from day one, from the outset. But okay, I just want to ask the question from your perspective and what you think about that, and what you do, what you would do if you haven't done it yet.
Maybe from our perspective, and Lara, you can elaborate more on the machine translation portion, because I think that that's also particular. But looking at our different technology solutions, some require more collaboration than others. Some we can be the decision makers and ensure that we have a good plan for the implementation. But in others, to ensure adoption, we do need to have good alignment on requirements. What we are looking for? And the most successful projects that we had, we even had some scoring system assigned to those requirements before going into finding the tool and confirming whether the tool met or not those set requirements. Because especially when it is a highly collaborative process, and when some stakeholders have preferences, then we have a more measurable way of assessing whether the tool is going to meet our needs or not. But of course, there are always more subjective aspects and additional things that we may not think in the requirements that may change the game. But overall, yes, when there is a need for collaboration, we put emphasis on that because that will also relate to the adoption later on.
Yeah, sure. Laura, you would like to add?
Yeah, I think that's very similar to what Viviana said, but maybe for machine translation, it is really collaborative because it is, you know, it's in between IT and the translation environment. So you will have requirements coming out from the IT organization. And I think somebody who will not have to forget in all kind of projects and technologies we are going to implement our offices like a privacy security office, compliance office. These kind of functions are always there. So we will have anyhow some kind of collaboration with some functions within the organization. But for some, yes, for global deployment, so for things like machine translation, for sure, also the IT organization is giving a list of their requirements for selection.
Yeah, awesome. Esther, I understood from your slide, but maybe I'm wrong. I understood that it was going to be your journey was going to be quite collaborative, also because you are a one-person team, probably. But is that the case, or how do you see that? Because you have a lot of experience as well. You know, what would be your preferred way of working here?
Yeah, absolutely. Collaborative, because otherwise, you know, you end up with technology that you're putting effort into and you're maintaining and so on, and you're not reaping the benefits. So that adoption part is key. But I'd like to turn the question around a little bit, Bruno, and ask how often we are actually involved in the technology selection processes for other teams. I think that's an interesting one as well, because very often, you know, we're not featuring there. And I, like at Sweatis, for instance, I had the experience of being consulted on that. It just makes such a difference. But to a great extent, it's actually our fault because we're not putting ourselves out there, showing what language technology is capable of doing, what our plans might be, and so on. And so we need to make it our business to be top of mind as well for these other teams who might be investing in technology that will affect our workflows.
No, I think it's a great point, Esther. The question here is, of course, focused on language technology, but you can ask the same question for any type of technology. And I think the background of my question was also to make sure that, obviously, you know, if you make it very collaborative as a process for selection and implementation, my personal view is that the people you are going to work with must really understand why language technology is going to be used and where the value is going to come from. Because otherwise you involve people who might not be aware or who might not understand what they need to make a decision on. And of course, they might just make a decision blindly and say, okay, you know, I would like to make sure that we use this technology, but they just made a decision based on their feeling or what they believe the technology is going to be, but without fully understanding it. And I think that's why, you know, for me, and I've seen that in other companies, the risk sometimes of making it very collaborative is that you are not always working with people who really understand you know, what's going to happen, so to speak. So it's a risk because, but of course, that goes back to how you educate people and how you make them understand what you are doing. So, and of course, that's why I think sometimes technology solutions are implemented by one or two teams because they don't want to make it too complicated. They just keep it in a team so that only that team is going to select it and work on it without having to explain everything to the rest of the organization. It's not something that I would recommend for sure, but I know that it happens in some companies where, you know, one or two teams are making decisions because they want to make it simple for themselves.
Right. I do think that in large companies, we do need to be also mindful of different functional requirements, and Laura alluded to that. For instance, we have GSO, a Global Security Office, that is heavily involved in any validation and any technology where there might be exposure to especially product-related documentation. So there are requirements that are non-negotiables, right? That the technology must conform to and are important to be taken along, and others that are more nice to haves. And hence, going back to the point I was making before, having a clear distinction of what is a must, what is a preference, what is a nice to have, and take that along through the selection process.
Yeah, totally agree with that. We still have 9 minutes, so if the audience wants to ask any question or make any comment, I guess it's the right time to do so. Still no question, no comment, no reaction. I don't see anything in the chat, but maybe let me know, panelists, if you are getting questions directly to you, because I might not see it in the overall chat. So since we are nearly at the end of this session, I just wanted to ask each of you about, and it's a very difficult question, but I know you probably have some thoughts about it. What, in your opinion, or in your current perspective, what are going to be the main challenges and the major opportunities of language technology in life science or in your organization in the next couple of years? So now we are at the end of 2022. So if we think about 2025, 2 years from now, what are you considering as the main opportunities, which is the positive side, and the main challenges, which is the less positive side, in what you need to do in your companies? I'm not sure who wants to start.
I can start if nobody else.
Okay.
That's fine. So I do see really lots of opportunities that language technology could create at corporate level, in terms of accessibility, first of all, accessibility of information on one side, but also accessibility to people with disabilities. So think about machine translation, but also auto captioning that has been recently included also as a standard in Windows 11, this kind of assistive technology, which is also language technology, and it's fantastic. So there will be really lots of things that will be done, I guess, to push forward the agenda of inclusion and diversity in terms of, for example, machine translation. So again, access to information, but possibly also interpretation or auto-interpretation, things like, machine translation integration in platforms like Zoom, WebEx, whatever else. There will be also technology that will help us to be faster to give support to our customers, internal customers, external customers, in chatbots and so forth. So there is plenty of opportunities that I see in there. And the risk, I think, what I have highlighted in the very beginning to me is that these technologies are becoming really, really good at delivering an output or an answer, but we as end users are not that equipped yet to be able to really discriminate and really have clear in our minds that output needs to be taken with a grain of salt. So that's for me, it's really, if I think about the language technology implementation as, let's say, a raw form, and not integrated in a localization workflow, but really as an end product.
Thanks, Laura. Bibiana, maybe you have.
We agree with Laura. I think that there will be a lot more technology that is AR powered in different types of services in the language industry. it's evolving very, very fast. I'm glad we have an expert in machine translation now at Medtronic as well to help us staying in tune to the trends out there. I mentioned in my talk before, one of the challenges we see is that lack of interoperability, or I don't know if the interoperability is the right word here, but the ability to be tool agnostic. That's actually one of the dreams for the future. I hope we will have a more flexible translation environment where we can work based on the standards and the best practices and not tie users to a specific tooling.
Yeah, great. Esther, I know, or we know now that you have a huge planning on the table. So my question is probably overkill, but if you want to highlight a few things, in your bag of treasures.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, just to say that that's a very, it's a very flexible plan. We'll see how it evolves. But yeah, I don't really have an awful lot to add to what Laura and Viviana have said. I think for me, it's going to be about the customer experience improvements, really. And that expectation, the expectation for speed and for kind of instant service as well is growing in our industry as well, not just like, of course, this is happening at all levels, and we might think that life sciences is not affected, but it is. Like, customers are starting to demand more, kind of real-time services. So that's a big challenge for international markets, and comes with security concerns and so on.
Even more customer centricity than today. Yeah, I would.
Yeah. But I mean, it's such an amazing opportunity as well for the value of our function to be better understood, better seen. Like, I think, I see it as a green field, really, not an easy one to get through, but full of opportunity.
And well, I just heard a few hours ago someone talking about the future of not language technology, but technology in general. And that person was saying that due to the recession, which is now in most of all in Europe, but also a little bit in the US, technology is going to be even more important because there will be even more pressure on cost and time due to the recession. So that might be, sometimes something bad like recession might be an accelerator for technology implementation, because technology is going to be, a must-have to deliver on the increased expectations. So yeah, that's we'll see. But we all see that we all saw that you had a very busy schedule. So I thank you very much for your time. We are coming, nearly to the end of this session. I would like to thank you very much for preparing this session, but also for sharing your thoughts, your experiences, your vision. And obviously, this was the last ValueCast for this year. We are all looking forward to being back next year with more topics, more guests, more panels. So thanks to the audience for joining, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.